Some improvements make services better, some make one metric better and everything connected to it worse. The difference is whether anyone looked at the connections before they started. The program board was pleased. Every KPI in the green. Response time down. First contact resolution up. Cost per ticket reduced. The service desk improvement had delivered exactly what it promised. 6 months later, the problem management team presented their own data. Recurring incidents were up 40%. The two teams had been working in the same organization, on the same service, in complete isolation from each other. This is the pattern of local optimization. You improve the part you own. The metric you are responsible for improves, and somewhere in the system connected to the part you changed, something else shifts. Sometimes that shift is visible immediately. More often it builds quietly for months before it becomes a number on someone else's dashboard, and by then the cause is hard to trace and the connection is harder to admit. 3 organizations, 3 genuine improvements that produced genuine problems in the parts of the system nobody was watching. The metrics were honest. The scope was just too narrow to show what the improvement was actually doing to the service as a whole. The real problem isn't that these teams did poor work. The service desk improvement at Service Mimir was well executed. The infrastructure investment at Orbis Health was technically sound. The CABI controls at CityGrid were properly designed. The problem was that each improvement was scoped to a part of the service, while the service itself is a system. And systems respond to change in ways that parts don't predict. That's where ITIL's 5th guiding principle comes in. Think and work holistically is the 5th ITIL guiding principle. It asks you to hold the whole service in view before you act on any part of it. Not because every change requires a full system analysis, but because every change affects a system. And ignoring that fact doesn't make it less true. In practice, this principle changes the first question you ask before any improvement decision. Instead of where is the problem in this part, you ask what is the system this part belongs to and how do the parts connect. The answer to that second question doesn't always change what you do, but it consistently changes how you do it, and it prevents the category of failure where the fix creates a problem nobody mapped. This is why holistic thinking matters in practice, not just in principle. The system response to a local change is not always immediate and not always obvious. The service desk improvement at Service Mimir took 6 months to surface in the problem management data. By the time it was visible, the connection between cause and effect had become genuinely difficult to prove and easier to dispute than to act on. These 3 traps all share the same structural flaw. They define success at the wrong level. The team wins, the service loses. And because the team's metric is the one being reported, the loss takes longer to surface than it should, and costs more to fix when it does. The second time Service Mimir approached service desk improvement, they started with a different question. Not how do we close tickets faster, but what happens to the service after a ticket is closed. That question led them to the suppressed problem records within a week. The incentive structure was adjusted. Problem management data recovered. Recurring incidents dropped within 2 cycles. The fix was simple. The map was what made it visible. 3 disciplines. Map before you change. Identify connections before you cut them. Measure at the system level, not just the team level. Applied consistently, these 3 habits prevent the class of problem where a genuine improvement quietly creates a worse one. Somewhere the improvement team never thought to look. The infrastructure team had done exactly what they were asked to do. Availability was the brief. Availability was delivered. Nobody in that program had ownership of what happened after a user logged in. Nobody had mapped the fulfillment process that sat behind the portal. And because fulfillment sat in a different team with a different budget and a different set of targets, the connection between portal access and user experience had never been part of anyone's improvement scope. The 4 dimensions aren't a framework for documentation. They're a checklist for holistic thinking. Before any significant service change, ask which dimensions are affected. A technology improvement that creates a process bottleneck hasn't solved the problem. It's moved it. An organizational change that ignores the technology it depends on will fail at the boundary between the 2. The dimensions exist precisely to prevent that kind of partial solution. Ask these 3 questions before every significant improvement decision. What connects to this? What changes for those connections? How will we measure the whole? 3 questions, 20 minutes. The cost of not asking them is visible in every post-incident review where the root cause traces back to an improvement that was successfully delivered. The CABI improvement had been well designed and well implemented within its own boundaries. Change success rates improved. The governance team reported the result as a win. What nobody had measured was deployment lead time, a metric owned by a different team with a different reporting line. When lead times tripled, the development teams didn't raise a formal concern. They found a workaround. The change success rate kept improving. The data behind it quietly became less representative of reality with every passing month. These 3 costs are the long-term consequence of sustained local optimization. Shadow processes, invisible deterioration, compounding fragility, none of them show up immediately. All of them are detectable early if someone is looking at the system rather than the parts. The principle doesn't require perfect system visibility. It requires the habit of looking beyond the boundary of the team doing the improving. The shift this principle asks for is a change in the direction of the question. Most improvement work starts with a part. This process is slow, this team is overwhelmed, this metric is red and works forward toward a fix. Holistic thinking starts with the outcome. What does a better service actually look like for the person using it? And works backwards to identify which parts, changed in what way and in what sequence, would produce that outcome. The starting point changes everything about where you end up. This is the rule. Map before you change, define the system outcome before you measure success, and treat any local improvement that coincides with a system deterioration as a signal worth investigating rather than a coincidence worth ignoring. The organizations that apply this consistently don't just have better services. They have services that stay better because the improvements they make account for what they're connected to. 3 actions. Map the connections of one current improvement before the next planning session. Check whether the system outcome is keeping pace with the team metric. And find one end-to-end user and ask them directly. 3 actions, none of which require a program or a tool, all of which require the willingness to look beyond the part you own toward the service you're part of. This principle doesn't require you to model the entire organization before you make a change. It requires 1 step upstream and 1 step downstream. What feeds into the part you are changing? What does the part you are changing feed into? 2 questions. Asked before every significant improvement decision? That's the whole practice, and it prevents a category of failure that no amount of post-incident review can undo. 3 ways to go further. Share your local improvement story in the comments. The examples that get posted will be worth more to this community than anything in the video. Check out the Mimir ITIL course for the full picture across all 7 principles. And this week, add 2 boxes to one process map. 1 upstream, 1 downstream. Draw the arrows. The map will tell you something the scope document didn't. Share your experience.